Hey folks, MasakoX here, and we're back reviewing the events of the ever-growing fan manga Dragon Ball Kakumei. Now if you think that Dragon Ball Super and its manga are a little bit too tame for your liking, and you want some very intense action in the Dragon world, as well as very detailed artwork, you can give this a read. I've got a playlist down below for you to catch up with the events of chapters 1 through 8. Mind you, the recent manga chapter 87 definitely tried to catch Kakumei's attention in the argy-bargy and graphic department, especially with gases extinguishing. Ugh. In any case, Kakumei's basic premise is that the angels from on high, including the GP, had to deal with the aftermath of the Tournament of Power, and the wish made by Android 17. That turned out to be, a little too literal. All the universes, even the ones erased by Zeno prior, were brought back, and there was a lot to unpack there. Check out the playlist up top and down below for the lowdown on the events prior. So let's get into Chapter 9. Chapter 9 begins with Dr. Paparoni taking Android 17 back to Universe 3 after a month spent on Earth waiting for Shinbot, his transporter, to recharge before going back across dimensions again. Not a bad idea. Quite good for technology, and it at least allows Paparoni to naturally get to know the gang and them understanding in detail what he requires of 17 off screen, so we don't have to see any of that and waste time. Now you may think 30 days isn't all that bad to wait for something that big, but when you've got an inter-universal conflict coming up in less than 2 years' time, that's quite a chunk of change that you've just left on the table there. So naturally, Paparoni's got to get back to his bots, and 17 has agreed to the terms and promises his kids, in the coolest and most Goku way possible, have you seen this many times with a cheeky low-angle thumbs-up pose, that he will promise to do well and come back for them. That is until Boo shows up and basically scuppers everything, but not before Hercule does his thing and announces to all that he's the strongest guy in the universe, right before Paparoni calls him out for having not competed in the Tournament of Power. Fair play. Also more chances to make Hercule look silly by him gawping at Crystal, the supermodel, 17's wife by the way, and the mother of their kids. And I also like the fact, like I said before, that the naming scheme has continued with that family regarding precious gems. You know, Crystal, their kid's called Sapphire, that's neat. But what isn't so precious, yet very predictable, is that Boo sees the bot, which has been lauded up to be quite important, and eats it. That's how he introduced himself to them. No elaboration, just eats and leaves. Or is that a panda? So yeah, Paparoni is stuck in Universe 7 and Boo is being carted off to the Demon Realm. But then again, since Boo is a Djinn himself, he might be right at home here. I'm not gonna lie. I was very annoyed with Boo doing that because that's just what Boo does, but where Boo has gone to the Demon Realm, okay, you have my attention. I will say right now that at least Kakumei has managed to address the balance of the story and the need for some levity in between said plot points. Sometimes it could be seen as super intense, especially at the beginning, whilst at other times it could be downright goofy, like chapter 3 and 4. Here, and the last chapter though, it was a really good mix of the two. Granted, it may later on need to be more intense in places for the sake of the general plot and the general theme, but for a typical chapter, this is a good combination of seriousness and charm. But back to Universe 11, and Gohan is wrapping up his mission to retrieve a top-secret vial from some bugs. And naturally, he is able to save the day, in a very elaborate fashion too, I may add, using his strategic nous in which to thwart the baddies and of course recover the object. Only to then be told he could have just forgotten all of that, just gone back out the route he came, the window, that he used to enter the building, and save himself a lot of time and effort. Oops. Casserole, the leader of the Pride Troopers, welcomes him in as the 82nd member of their squad, something of which cures an itch amongst the fandom, and especially the fandom of Gohan, them really wanting to see their boy interact with the Pride Troopers. And here we are, getting that. If there is one thing that Kakumei does very well, it's scratching plenty of fandom itches. And naturally too, it doesn't feel forced. I'm also a sucker for the whole trip of chucking something in the air, doing the cool stuff, punchy, and then catching the same thing in a couple of other panels. That always gets me, never gets old for me. Later on, we get a dinner that the troopers have laid out for Gohan to celebrate their introduction to the team. All the present members are there, including ones we remember from the Tournament of Power, like Cocotte for example. And Gohan is getting to know more of Dispo and his family. And I like this because, you know, the whole Dispo-Gohan connection thing they have in the tournament. And it turns out that Dispo has kids too, and he's been at it like rabbits. That picture being the latest litter, because get it, he's a rabbit, cat, bat guy. Hence why Dispo might feel right at home here with the troopers, since they themselves are a big family. They're out for a family night dinner, and their patriarch dramatically arrives. Belmod, who according to Toyotaro was one of the original members many moons ago, arrives looking haggard in a suit, with a crutch and Toppo beside him. He had managed to cheat death, which is what you're supposed to do after giving up the title of the GOD. Go and check out my previous reviews. That whole process is explained, and ho-ho! Wow. I crossed paths with death, but the current wasn't very strong, so I came back. Oh, that's pretty metal. The other plot from this chapter, which is what we got a glimpse of on the chapter cover, is that of Goten and Trunks beginning their training with Whis to discover more of their potential and ultimately unlock God Ki at the end of it all, to make them more useful for the battle ahead. But their main issue as it's transpired is that they aren't able to see each other in sync and have to rely on fusion to try and claw some of the deficit back. Both of them have to now face their inner demons in order to progress. And their inner demon, guess who it turns out to be? It turns out to be no other than Gotenks! Yeah, in short, just don't rely on Gotenks. Wow, what a great message. Gotenks hasn't really done anything useful since his debut. Granted, superheroes actually managed to rectify some of the balance. But in any case, what better way to negate that plot thread than by making the boys believe in themselves more as a regular team? Brilliant. Not to mention we don't ever have to see or hear about that fusion ever again in this story. Now, I do love me some fusion, but Gotenks... the super anime really did him dirty, like really dirty. However, another revelation has come to pass, and Beerus has had to resort to some pretty drastic measures in which to gather strength for the task ahead. After 1,000 years or so of ignoring this, he has decided to go home and seek guidance from his kind. The Oracle Fish is worried, but Beerus knows what to do, and heads out in his combat gear. Ooh, that's cool. With Chapter 9 gone, Chapter 10 is here, and it's called True Justice. And this is going to be a Saiyan chapter, I think, and once again, the King of Sadala and Vegeta are going to be butting heads. Oh yes, this is going to be Vegeta Prime, folks. Buckle up. This chapter is very much showing you as to why Super Vegeta is king, in front of a literal king. However, before we get to that, we find out Beerus has returned to his planet, his homeworld, planet Gezi. Do you get the reference to the pyramids of Giza there, the whole Egyptian connection? And he has spotted that his brother Champa has come to pay his respects to their father too, in front of that sarcophagus. And he'd been waiting there a month. But what's a month to a god, really? With the brothers united though, the antics of Goten and Trunks can now take precedent. They're the focus, as they begin the second part of their training, which is to understand God Ki itself and be able to have it merge with their bodies, their physical forms. This most likely being extrapolated from the episode where Frieza is able to manipulate God Ki and a Kai energy and just do everything he can, and then Goku really struggled. Can they? Because they're the sons of the main characters? No, they can't. And it's done, as you would expect from Kakumei, through pain. And Whis just laughs it off, saying that their fathers were the only ones in millions of years who ever survived this ordeal. Whoa. Whis, wow, you're some kind of masochist here. Which you can be too if you become a member today and press the join button below. Not gonna lie though, this is the coolest I've ever seen the boys act. Them swearing to be better than their fathers. And speaking of fathers, we head to Vegeta on Sadala in Universe 6, where training is continuing. Until it isn't anymore, since King Sadala has now gotten cold feet, for the nth time, and wants him and Broly off his world right now. Naturally, Vegeta doesn't take too kindly to this and holds his ground before the king punches him to said ground, revealing his true power and how he has a lot more than he's let on before, and he's been desperate to contain it. And he's also pretty salty that Vegeta's actually been gaining respect from his own people, and then he's also worried about potential coup and undermining, so yeah. This then leads to the traditional art of Saiyan combat to deal with supremacy issues. Amongst the very flashy and visceral choreography in these scenes, both Sadala and Vegeta are exchanging verbal blows too, with the king having to answer to his reluctance as to joining the other Saiyans, that's Caulifla, Kale and Kaba, in the Tournament of Power to defend their own universe, and of course the previous Universe 6 tournament too. And that means he actually willingly ignored Champa's orders, which is quite ballsy. What I also like about this fight is that Vegeta, who is usually quite good at reading his opponent, isn't quite as good here. He is hoodwinked quite a few times here by someone who is supposed to be weaker than him, when he assumes a move that never comes. The king is getting mad and is quite clearly delusional at this point, and hysterical in the midst of their challenging encounter, and literal butting of heads before one more flashpoint emerges. Vegeta becomes a Super Saiyan at the right moment in order to finish things off for good, and that's when the king reveals that he could turn into a Super Saiyan. He can transform, but has been able to stop himself from doing so, to which he explains to the prince. Turns out that his transformation in the past, just the transformation, killed people, and then it ended more afterward. Wow, that's actually something I didn't really think about. Yeah, how the aura of Super Saiyan could blast away regular folk if you're caught in the middle of it, you know, that's food for thought. Now he associates that form with simple hatred and vile force, hence why he chose to suppress it. Okay, alright, that's understandable. This is where the juicy part comes in though, folks. Vegeta explains to the king that he uses Super Saiyan wisely, that his time on Earth has taught him to lament his past self and learn from it, that he is wise to become a better person, whilst retaining his Saiyan pride, the thing that makes him who he is, that it is possible to harness the wild power and use it instead like a weapon for your own wants. You don't have to give in to that hatred. Kaba didn't. However, Bulma and Trunks aren't the main reason for his change. No, that would have made it a little bit too schlocky. It was Kakarot. The true justice part of this story came from Kakarot. The Super Saiyan opened my eyes to my friend. That is both epic and wholesome. Those words alone are enough to calm the king down and end their charade. Sadala beginning to understand that Super Saiyan can be a tool. He can control. It doesn't have to be something that controls him. With one handshake, the deed is done, and the king can now be in peace. Took him long enough. As the chapter ends, we see Videl teaching her old man how to fly. Again, took him long enough, and not having to ever use a jetpack like he did in the video games. And another entity, the big bad for the next part of this arc, from Universe 14, is awoken. A threat our heroes can't even begin to imagine. But we shall find out what in next week's Kakumei catch-up. All in all, these two chapters have actually been pretty good in trying to understand what Kakumei is going to be in the long run. There are some moments here which actually call out a lot of things that have a lot of issues in the Dragon Ball Super anime and Dragon Ball as a whole. The way that Vegeta is handled in this chapter, chapter 10 especially, is perfect, in my opinion. Super was really good in trying to evolve Vegeta's personality, but it was still telling us that he was just doing what he did in the Buu saga again. Now though, Kakumei is enhancing upon it, and whilst you could think that the King of Sadala, oh, he's just a tolerably old fool who denies the power and doesn't want change. No, he was a Super Saiyan himself. That makes up for all of that, folks. I was annoyed with the king initially, being reluctant for change, but no, he was indeed a Super Saiyan, and he was scared. He was scared of his own power, and that those Super Saiyans could do what he did. It could all end up with Sadala going up in smoke. He was worried about his people and of himself, and I must admit those two people being caught up in the crossfire of the aura alone, that did open my eyes in a way. I was like, oh, yeah. That aura can burn. Yeah, Kakumei does make you think sometimes in the midst of all the really intense visuals, and it's quite graphic. And yeah, if you didn't really get that from the chapter 1 review, yeah, you're not really reading the right manga. This is a little bit too much for you. But also the whole thing with Goten and Trunks, their journey, is something I think is absolutely vital for their character development. Dragon Ball Super Superhero has only just made them grow up, but what are they going to be like now that they're older? Now we're starting to see them actually develop into new characters who are older and have got their own journey in which to conquer. And I actually think Whis is enjoying this journey, seeing it from the different perspective, that they're not exactly like their old men, and yet there's some familiarity about them and their eagerness to improve. And yes, I know the whole Majin Buu thing was a little bit contrived, and it's like, oh, it's something that he's done before. But okay, I just like the rapidness of it. That's what made me forgive it mostly. That, oh, Buu just turned up, he ate it, and then 2 chapters later he was gone. And at least where he went is something that could be really spicy plot devices later on in the story. It goes somewhere. Instead of the Tournament of Power where he falls asleep, that doesn't go anywhere. It's not satisfying. This though, the Demon Realm and Buu, that could be satisfying. I'll forgive it, I'll allow it. I'll allow it. That's the thing about Kakumei. It's willing to try new things whilst also making things relatively familiar. As I said, also, It scratches the itches of many fans that want things to happen that the main story does not even touch. And that's what I respect about Kakumei the most. It is willing to do it in a very natural and organic way. It's not just shoved in there because people want it. It's sort of woven into the plot in a way that makes sense. And that's something I will teach you folks if you're wanting to make your own What Ifs. You gotta try and weave your things into the story, what you really want from the characters. Not to mention the visuals are just peachy. But if you want to actually know more about the story, do check out my playlist where I reviewed the previous chapters, and look forward to next week where I'll be covering chapters 11 and 12. And then after that, I'll be catching up with the chapters as they come out. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next video. Catch you later!